Hello, it's Stuart Angus McCowan, and I'm back because, well, the last video I uploaded had a reaction. There was a reaction. um, Apparently, I am the number one Warhammer internet villain, according to some of the comments. I'm going to address some of the general trends I saw in the video, um, in terms of the comments. There's a lot of pearl clutching, guys. It is a miniatures game. Just let me remind you. This is not a life or death. I'm not declaring war on Scandanavia. That was the funniest comment to me. Is I'm putting an entire continent on blast. First of all, I'll get into it. Anyway, we'll get into it. So I'm going to address. I'm not going to put the comments up because I'm not going to do you guys badly yet by revealing your names. I don't want to do that, right? But look, I might do a mean comments video in the future because my channel has some of just the most outrageously rude, horrible comments on it I've seen of any YouTuber for no reason at all. So let me just remind you that I'm actually just a dude on the other side of the screen. I'm not like some internet celebrity Megatron dude. I don't know who these people think I am, but I'm just a dude who lives in Japan, who lives a relatively humble life, okay? So just chill, all right? So we'll get into the comments because I want to address some things that are just straight up wrong, and I don't want those perceptions spreading. I could just delete the comments, but I'm not really supportive of that sort of form of censorship. I do like the discussion, of course, but just want to address some things. So the first thing I want to say, for the people who seem to have missed this along the way, is I have spent an enormous amount of my life on Warhammer, okay? Like, if you guys knew how much I played this game, I don't think you'd ever accuse me of not liking AOS, alright? I love AOS, okay? There's no question about that. I think we have this element of toxic pearl clutching in the Warhammer community where as soon as someone says anything negative about the game, we assume that we're attacking the game, we're attacking the community, attack everything that the game represents. It's actually perfectly reasonable if you love something to criticize it and want it to get better, alright? I know this form of constructive criticism seems to be offensive to some people, especially in the current period of history we live in. But, imagine you're in a relationship with someone. You do want to have constructive conversations with each other about how you can make your life better, okay? Like, things in the house you can do better, this is the schedule we're going to have for the dishes, this sort of thing, all right? So when you're in love with something, I think that you have, it's not even a sense of a right, but you actually kind of have a duty to constantly improve it because there is a rule in life, which is that if you don't maintain and try to improve things, they will rot and just get worse over time on themselves, all right? Okay, this is entropy, right? If we leave something alone, something bad will happen eventually. Okay, and that is definitely the case with Warhammer. If I leave Games Workshop to their own devices and not say anything, and none of us say anything, it will go wrong eventually. I think that is true. So I will continue to say stuff about the game that I don't like and that I do like, and that is how I'm going to go forward because I love AOS, but I want it to be better. So that is that. Yeah. Now, why don't I upload videos that are positive about the game? Well, I would say it's this. A lot of those videos that you guys are used to that are positive about the game are actually advertisements for the game. Like, all the creators that you have that are sponsored by Games Workshop in the form of them being sent stuff to advertise, I'm not criticizing these creators at all, but the design of these videos from the perspective of Games Workshop is to advertise their products. So when you watch those videos, you are watching an ad, okay? Yes, it could be framed in the sense of a review, but it's still an ad because they're getting products provided for them by Games Workshop in the context of them reviewing the product. Now, Games Workshop might be fine with a sense of criticism over some of the products that they get sent, but fundamentally there's a conflict of interest there, right? You can't be fully critical of a product that they're sending you because there's a possibility that they don't send it to you anymore, and then you're not going to be able to review it, and then you're not going to be able to make money on YouTube reviewing it, right? So it is an ad, much like, many video game reviews are an ad because they get sent the game from the company, and there's a threat that if they don't review the game positively, then they might not get sent the games anymore. Okay? Same thing with Warhammer. So those are kind of hidden ads. And so the positivity that you're used to in those videos, you won't see on channels like mine. You won't see on other channels like, perhaps Honest Wargamer. I've noticed that he's kind of tempered maybe some of his criticism he's had in the past. Whatever, that's his choice. I respect Rob and love him a bit, so I'm sure he's doing what he sees right there. But, these sorts of independent channels, we have the possibility of criticizing things in a different way because we don't have this conflict of interest, right? So that is what you guys are used to. So when I come in on a video and I say something that is explicitly critical about Games Workshop, there's a lot of lashing out from the perspective of you think that I'm attacking the game. This is actually what content is normally like when it's not polluted by some form of sponsorship or advertisement, where someone can be completely honest about their opinion. I've noticed that not all, but a lot of the review YouTubers, when a War Scroll comes out that sucks, like it's just completely terrible, like a lot of the Stormcast War Scrolls, if you guys remember that, when all the new models came out and they had terrible War Scrolls. Same with the Gits thing. There's like this thing of like, oh, I don't know about this, but if the points change, it could be alright, and yeah, the model's cool, so you guys should buy it anyway, this kind of thing. I don't love it because it's fundamentally not fair to you guys as consumers to just say that everything's fine, and like, yeah, you can buy the model because it looks cool, whereas fundamentally, in my opinion, it should be that you buy the model because the models look cool, and also the rules are good because we're partially buying for the rules. So that's a little bit of a side point, but what I'm saying is that the content I make, which is critical of Games Workshop, I can do so because I'm not sponsored by them, and not saying that I don't want to be sponsored by them. I'd be happy to do that review content as well, but I would refuse to be, engaging in discourse where I feel like I'm being dishonest to myself. So when I get on here, I'm being fully honest about what my opinion is, and my love for the game is probably more or equal to just about anyone. Okay, I would say I've put more hours into this game than just about anyone, especially from the gameplay side of view. Okay, not a massive hobbyist, but I'm a little bit, but more into the gameplay side of things. I put hours and hours and hours into this, okay? So that's where I'm coming from, and I really want you guys to understand that, because I will release videos that are critical in the future. That is a guarantee. But in those videos, I'm coming from a place of, I love this company, I love this game, etc. But I want it to be better. This aspect is lazy, etc. Okay? So that's where I'm coming from. Okay. Next major thing that I want to address in the in a sense of Pearl Clutches Anonymous is to do with the supposed attack on the continent of Scandinavia. First of all, it's not a continent. let's just not a continent, by the way. Subcontinent, okay, technically speaking, I think. Or a region. It's definitely not a continent. It's part of Europe. Yeah. Okay, now when I'm talking about the northwestern Europe, I want to just clarify what I mean. I'm not talking about the UK. I should have made that clear. The UK, okay, is technically part of Europe, but they did Brexit. That was the thing that happened. So they Brexited everywhere, and yeah. So I'm not talking about the UK. I'm talking about anything Germany and northwards. What I would say. Now, it sounds like I was being critical of those countries, and regardless of what my personal opinion is of the gameplay that's developed, particularly around those regions, which may or may not have emanated from a patient zero of France. Look, okay, I'm just going to get into it because I'm kind of just dodging around it. I'm not going to talk about what my opinion is. I'm just going to say what an opinion is that is out there. Okay, I'm going to present this kind of has to be said because I think we're all just kind of dodging around it. No one's really said it publicly. Okay, so there is an opinion that there has been some sloppy play historically from the side of England as a response to that, and from a competitive level, I think France is engaged in the opposite of sloppy play, which is maybe a bit too strict, okay? And then at some point, that has made its way northward to the Scandinavian countries, and now there is a situation where a lot of European countries are playing in the way that that French response to the English sloppiness first happened, okay? That is a way of viewing what's happened at the World Championship in the past few years. Okay, I think that's a bit of an oversimplification. But what I want to say is that no one is intrinsically wrong in the way that they're going about this whole measurement thing, right? There's no core rule that says this is how we treat measurements, right? Like, a big example is, how are you going to deal with the fact that we're playing a game of inches that exists in a three-dimensional space that's not based on inches? Like, we're not... Like, inches is not the bottom gradient, okay? Now, they actually have half inch in this game, alright, in several aspects. And I guess that's where we stop, is we stop at a unit of half inches. I don't know. So this is the sort of thing that we need, like, a concrete community agreement on, right? In terms of the measurement. Like, are we going to measure only in units of 0.5 inches? Are we going to measure in units of 0.25 inches? I don't know, okay? Well, this sort of thing is not articulated at all, and so what it results in, for one reason or another, is different countries having different measurement standards, okay? And what that means is that when we go to a world championship, we all have different standards on the certain things that need to be measured. Like, for example, when I move a unit of 40 models, do I need to individually measure every model, or can I kind of like show where the front and back are going to go and then move them that way? This sort of thing is, yes, it's something we can negotiate on the table, but when it comes to a world championship where there's referees and this kind of thing, we do need a standard for what that's going to be. And over the past few years, that standard has seemed to evolve to whatever your opponent can legally hold you to in terms of legal measurement standards is whatever they're allowed to do. That has been the rule, unfortunately. So if you play someone who's going to hold you to the ends of the earth on measuring everything, they can. It's not illegal. Yes, it's against the spirit of the game, but I believe there's something that's coming in this year about that, but until this year, there hasn't been anything about that. And so any sort of micro kind of advantage that can be gained in terms of holding people to those standards, it can be taken. It occurred on the level of rules as well, right? So the famous one that happened in the World Championship, which involved two of the top teams, was one, and actually happened in many other games, including two of my games, by the way, was that in 3rd edition, and same in 4th edition, actually, you have to declare all-out attack before we pile in, okay? And people would pile in and then declare all-out attack. That was really normal, okay? In a bunch of regions, including basically all the TTS games I ever played, everyone did that, right? And certain teams took advantage of that, and so when people piled in and said, I want all-out attack, they said, no, you piled in, it's already too late, okay? That kind of thing. Same with wizard finders or any sort of sequencing that happened like that. So this thing was actually happening at the World Championship, where every micrograin of rules that could be taken advantage of, every micro timing that could be taken advantage of, was being taken advantage of. Okay, and so when we talk about that, Scandinavian style, what I was talking about, unfortunately, that was a part of that. I mean, they quite publicly apologized for some of it. Okay, so I'm not going to pretend that didn't happen. We all know what happens. We've all moved on from it. Okay, but my point in the video is the threat of that existing, because I'm not sure that it's gone away. Okay, at least on TTS, pretty people chill. But when people are at the World Championship, all the chips are down, and we're playing as competitively as possible. How can I be confident in playing a Horde army with buffed auras that are incredibly important, that my opponent's not going to hold me to, this is not wholly within 9, even though you said it was, because On my measurement, it's 9.05, and I'm going to call over a ref and verify that. Okay, I have no confidence that that's not going to happen. Okay, so that's why I was talking about these buff horde melee armies in the context of that region's style of play being problematic, right? Because if I'm trying to play these complicated armies that have like a go turn, Daughters of Cain's a classic example, load up the Witch Shelf, send them in, and if it doesn't work, I will lose the game, okay? Go up, send them in, and my opponent and I have a disagreement about something, and then the ref, they get to choose what their judgment is, and my game might be just decided by that. So if I'm preparing in the context of going to the World Championship, yeah, I can practice it over and over again, but until I get there, I'm not sure what's going to happen. It could go horribly wrong. There could be things like that could happen, okay? And it might sound like I'm exaggerating, but these things did happen in my games and the games that other people were playing, right? They just did happen, okay? So that's the place I'm coming from, is this kind of nervousness about bringing these sorts of armies because of the past experiences I've seen from a playstyle, which I'm not saying is intrinsically wrong, but is one that exists, okay? All right. That's the Scandinavian thing, all right? Now, the other thing I want to talk about is the American thing, because I did mention in the video that some of these horde armies do better in America because sloppy play is more allowed there, okay? Now, I actually in the video was not specifically talking about America. I actually said Australia, and I was just using it as an example of a region that's not inside Europe. So my target was not specifically claimed at America. The reason that America is relevant is just because a lot of tournaments are played there. And so when we look at Warhammer stats, you're going to find that the armies that I'm talking about that need a lot of movement are not doing like so bad because of the influence of American stats. But I'm sure if you went down and you looked at, you know, well, first of all, if you look at Europe, I don't think you're going to see many of these armies, which you don't. You know, like you don't see, for example, the big one last year is like Gits didn't do anywhere near as well in Europe as it did in America. Stuff like that, okay? So, I mean, even like Zombies is not, when that was broken, was doing much better in America than it was in Europe for, I think, similar reasons. So, yeah, I wasn't specifically talking about America. I was just giving an example. I mean, sloppy play happens everywhere. I mean, like where I'm in Japan, people just don't really care. So, and I don't really care either. So everyone just plays super sloppy, and we're all fine with it, right? No one cares. Okay. So I mean, all the tournaments, everyone's just moving stuff like an inch less, an inch more. Like just not. No one cares here, right? We're just trying to have fun. So, and we play pure by intention here. But there's countries that don't do that, and that was my point. And all I was saying with America is that this is an example of a country that does play by intention, and like, you know, there are a lot of players are just like, there's a lot of drinking involved as well. I mean, people trying to have fun, right? So not everyone's going to be as stringent, and there's nothing wrong with that. So that's what I was talking about in the video. Now, the point of comparing these countries and talking about how playstyle differences might be an issue was trying to thread a specific subtle needle, okay? So this kind of whole background of the country's differences is like a supporting detail to what I wanted to get at in the video, which was that the big thing I'm trying to get at is there's a simple way of playing the game. You can quickly crack out lists. I was talking about in the aspect of list design. Some of you don't like that, but as you know, I don't mind it as a thing. Okay, can quickly get out efficient lists. Often, you know, like these one drops have been a problem, but there'll be plenty of other lists that are efficient. I promise you, Fire Slayers will have a list that goes. We all know what it is, all right? If you're sniffing the internet incenses, okay, you know what I'm talking about. There'll be lists out there that are relatively simple to play, okay. And to counter those armies, so here, let me articulate this point, okay? So if you're playing a simple army, the advantage of it is that it's easy to play, okay? The disadvantage of it is the fact of it being easy to play often means that it has low flexibility. And so what that means is if you encounter an army that has a lot of tricks, and an army that has a lot of tricks has to be complex, okay? that you might not be able to respond, okay? And so that is the downside of having, a 1-drop Slaves of Darkness, is my opponent has some sort of counter mechanic. Some way, so if I charge in, they're going to get distracts first, and there's not much I can do about it. Or some way I'm going to charge in, and they do mortal wounds on death, but I can't do anything about that, because the only way I can do damage with my Slaves of Darkness army is to run at people, okay? This sort of thing, like you have some sort of trick, and then they can't really counter it, okay? And often these tricksy armies are complicated because they have lots of different tricks, and learning when to apply them at the right time is the difficult part, okay? So my point was that given that this relationship exists, okay, these simple armies are countered by complicated armies, like your complicated control armies, for example, right? It doesn't have to be a control army, but it's an example. My point was that given these maybe not even control, just complicated armies are difficult to play in the context of the measurement standards, what you're going to see if we don't fix something about our measurement standards is poor game balance. That was my point, was that if you don't fix it or do something about the way that we do it, we're going to have poor game balance. Now, the solution that I suggested is not a solution. What my point was to demonstrate through absurdity that this is the only way this can work in our current iteration of looking at things, okay? So what I was saying was that, if you remember, I had that notepad up and I said, if you're at this point and you haven't watched the previous video, by the way, I would watch the previous video. It's not going to make sense otherwise. I said that if I have more models, I should have to be less accurate with the way I move things, okay? All right? That was the kind of like absurd thing that I was saying. That's not what I'm saying that I want it to be. I'm saying if that's not the case, then the current version of the game doesn't work. Because what it means is if we're all holding each other to the same standards, then the simple armies get held to the same standards as the complex armies, and that means that the complex armies, I'm not going to be confident I can play at International Warhammer. You see what I'm saying? So I'm not saying we should hold them to different standards. I'm saying in the current way that we play this game, the only way that it would work is if we did hold them to different standards. Otherwise, simple armies would be better. You see what I'm saying? So one of two things needs to happen, in my opinion. Okay? We need to come up with a internationalized standard of measurement. That is the first thing that needs to happen. Okay? And what I mean is, by what unit are we measuring? Okay? Like down to what granularity? What are acceptable things to double check your opponent for measuring? How do we move a big unit? Do we move every model individually, or are we allowed to shorthand it with our opponent's consent? All these things need to be clarified on a rules level, down to every minute detail, if this game is going to be balanced at a competitive level. Okay? If it's not going to be the social contract thing, which is what I'm saying that it has to be right now, if we don't have any standard, okay, then it has to be that. We have to come up with and preferably Games Workshop would do it given they developed the damn game, alright, could come up with a concrete set of rules about the spirit of the game, things that are allowed, things that are not, things you're allowed to pull up your opponent on, things you're not. All this sort of thing we need to clarify. Otherwise, we're going to have this problem every time we go to an International Warhammer event and someone takes it remotely seriously, okay? So that's the first thing. Alright, the second thing is, we need to get rid of some of these simple armies, man. And some of you in the comments were criticizing me for the list point, saying that, lists are too simple and it sucks that the game's too simple. And yeah, I know what you're saying about if you own $10,000 worth of models, but like, bro, not everyone does. And look, you're right, okay? The game is too simple. That is just fundamentally true. All I was saying is that, like, sometimes there is, if you're looking at making 15 different armies work, then sometimes list building being simple is good. But the fact of the reality of it is that the game is too simple, and that's going to accentuate these problems, because at least in AOS 3 we had all these problems with the measurement thing and the spirit of the game and the different measurement standards between regions and the different complexities of armies. But for the most part, complex armies were just stronger than simple armies, right? So you actually just had to play them. And so most people were just playing complicated armies for the most part, right? That is mostly true. Like, yeah, there were some outliers, like, your Gargants in there, and there were some hacky hack lists in there, right? But most of the armies in the game are actually relatively difficult to play. So now that's not really true. There's so many linear armies that are relatively strong, and if if I'm a Scandinavian player, what I would do is just play Slaves of Darkness and play a 1-drop and just be painful against my opponent if they're playing a complicated army, and then you might win anyway, right? Not saying that's wrong or right, but I'm saying if you wanted to win, that is what you would do, and you would be in your rights to do that at the moment. So we need to have some kind of like international standard. We need to make the simple armies worse. That is up to Games Workshop, because that we've given them the balancing role here. I'd say those are probably the two main things we need to address. I'll still have a percolate on what else I think we can do about it, but those are probably the two main things we can do. Yeah. Otherwise, until that happens, it's just going to have to be what I'm talking about, right? It just has to be a social contract if we can't do that. Because at the moment, the game, it's not going to work if we don't like actively think about these things. Because what is going to happen, all right, is if we don't find some ways so that the complicated armies on an international level can work without less conflict, is you're just going to see people bring really cynical, simple armies, right? And Team England has done this to tremendous success over the years. Of course, my friend Luke being a part of it, of just taking these immensely hacky hack broken armies and doing well with them. Because fundamentally, if you're going to play against regions that are stringent at the table, if I have like 6 Stonehorns, what are they going to pick me up on? I've got like no rules, bro. Like, if I've got, shout out to Darren for playing the Foxes. Like, that was a great example of a list, right? It's just a wonderful list to play in International Warhammer because people just potentially might be a bit painful with you. So if you've got a simple list, it's going to be good in International Warhammer. And until we find some way to open the door to playing more complex armies without conflict, then we're just going to still have this problem over and over again. So as a community, we need to come together and think about how we can do that. And that's where I'm going to end this video. So thank you very much. All the pearl clutches in the comments. Please remember, A, I love this game. B, it should be made better. And C, I'm just a person. Okay? And I will see you next time. Bye-bye.